In tonight's news edition, a breakthrough deal is reached between Iran and 6 world powers to curb but not scrap Tehran's uranium enrichment, and Iranians welcome the agreement with optimism. Fighting continues in Syria, leaving more than 160 people dead around Damascus suburbs, and diplomatic sources say the Syria peace conference may be set for January. And mixed reactions on the streets of Cairo after interim President Adli Mansour signs a bill requiring protesters to get permission from the police before gathering. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour held talks here in Amman with his Palestinian counterpart Rami al-Hamdallah, who conveyed a message from the Palestinian president to His Majesty King Abdullah. In his message, Abbas voiced appreciation of His Majesty's support to Palestinians as they seek a peace settlement with Israel. Mansour and Hamdallah discussed the issues of Jerusalem and other Muslim and Christian holy sites in the West Bank. Mansour reiterated the importance of these sites to Jordan. And finally, a breakthrough deal was reached between Iran and 6 world powers to curb but not scrap Iranian uranium enrichment. Here's the story.
Foreign ministers from 6 countries reached an historic deal with Iranian officials on reducing the country's nuclear program in exchange for limited sanctions relief. U.S. President Barack Obama spoke from the White House moments after the deal was reached.
Today, that diplomacy opened up a new path toward a world that is more secure, a future in which we can verify that Iran's nuclear program is peaceful and that it cannot build a nuclear weapon.
Details of the agreement include Iran's commitment to stop expanding its nuclear enrichment program and to provide IAEA inspectors daily access to its nuclear facilities. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif told reporters the deal will help remove doubts about the purpose of the country's nuclear program.
I believe it is important that we all of us see the opportunity to end an unnecessary crisis and open new horizons based on respect for the rights of Iranian people and removal of any doubts about the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program.
All parties involved have agreed the deal is only a first step. The preliminary pact would run for 6 months while world leaders in Tehran hammer out a broader, longer-term settlement.
The deal between Iran and 6 world powers left some skeptical about a peaceful Middle East, while others viewed it as a game-changing rapprochement that would reduce the risk of wider war in the region. By reducing the chance of military action against Tehran and the prospect of more sanctions relief in future, Iranians believe the Geneva Pact may encourage the revival of domestic investment and pull the economy out of recession. This report has more.
The deal won the critical endorsement of Iranian clerical Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. And Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said his government is very optimistic that people's lives can go back to how they were before, adding that it is desirable to have relations with other countries after 10 years. During an address to the nation, Rouhani said the pact recognizes the country's nuclear rights.
It has been written clearly in the text of this agreement that Iran will continue its enrichment. And therefore, I announce to the people of Iran that enrichment will continue in the same way as before.
Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency called the pact an important step forward and said the IAEA is ready to help verify its implementation. As news of the pact was released, Iran's currency jumped more than 3% against the US dollar amid hopes that the economy would start recovering from international sanctions. Under the deal, Iran would have temporary, conditional access to several $billion of blocked funds over the next 6 months as diplomats try to negotiate a final agreement. But there were mixed reactions to the agreement. While supporters said a rapprochement between 2 powers, meaning Iran and the United States, could help stabilize the region and reduce sectarian strains between Shiites and Sunnis, Others believe the pact would further endanger the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said all along he does not and will not support a deal with Iran.
Now, for the first time, the international community has formally consented that Iran continue its enrichment of uranium. And this is in direct contravention of UN Security Council resolutions.
But the U.S. sees it differently. Secretary of State John Kerry said the plan will actually make the region more safe.
This first step, I want to emphasize, actually rolls back the program from where it is today.
Under the deal, Iran has agreed to stop uranium enrichment above a certain level and will allow UN nuclear inspectors access to its facilities. Iran has maintained its program is purely for energy purposes. World leaders hope the deal will make sure that's the case. The preliminary pact would run for 6 months, while world leaders and Tehran hammer out a broader, longer-term settlement. Ali Tuqan for the News at 10.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry flew from Geneva to London, where he joined British Foreign Secretary William Hague for talks. During a joint news conference, Kerry said he will be working closely with Hague on convening the Geneva II conference aimed at ending the violence in Syria.
We are working very closely together, Secretary Hague and I and others, on the question of the Geneva II and trying to move forward on peace in the challenge of Syria. We know it's very difficult. Nobody has any illusions. But we all know there is no military solution. And the only way to deal with millions of people who are displaced within their own country and millions of people who are refugees is to end the violence.
In Syria, meanwhile, a vicious battle in the eastern suburbs of Damascus left more than 160 people killed in the past 2 days as rebels struggled to break a month-long blockade by Syrian government forces. The fighting began on Friday when rebel units attacked a string of military checkpoints encircling the opposition-held suburbs in an area known as the Eastern Ghouta, which has been under siege for more than 6 months. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said it had documented about 100 deaths on the rebel side on Friday and Saturday in eastern Ghouta and more than 60 among Syrian government forces. In New York, diplomatic sources said U.S., Russian, and UN officials who will meet in Geneva on Monday are likely to set a day for January for the Syria Peace Conference. The sources said the UN Secretary General will announce the date at the end of the Monday meeting. The Geneva II Conference on Syria is to host representatives of the Syrian government and opposition groups to agree on a resolution that would end the civil war in the country. Protesters took to the streets in Cairo and other cities to mark the passing of 100 days since security forces dispersed 2 pro-Morsi sit-ins in Cairo when hundreds were dead. As the people demonstrated, state television reported that interim president Adli Mansour signed a bill which requires protesters to get advance permission from the police before gathering. Mansour's approval of the law came as a 50-member committee prepares to vote on an amended constitution that will be put to a referendum expected in coming months. Some on the streets of Cairo said the government should focus on tackling the source of people's grievances rather than clamping down on the symptoms. But others said they had enough of protests, which have been a regular feature of daily life in Egypt since the ousting of former President Hosni Mubarak nearly 3 years ago.
If I want to express my opinions in a peaceful, decent way, that's fine. But to express one's opinions by blocking streets, damaging property and opposing and arguing with others, that's not expressing an opinion. It's terrorism.
In Afghanistan, an assembly of tribal and community elders endorsed a security deal to enable U.S. troops to operate in the country beyond next year. The assembly convened to debate the pact and advised Afghan President Hamid Karzai to sign it immediately. It is now up to him to sign. The pact allows thousands of U.S. troops to remain in bases across the country once combat operations end next year. This report has the details.
An assembly of Afghan elders are ready to make a deal with the U.S. The assembly, known as the Loya Jirga, voted in favor of a security deal to allow U.S. troops to remain in the country past next year. Now it's up to President Hamid Karzai to sign the pact into law. Karzai, however, appeared uncertain in his final remarks.
While we're ready to give bases for Americans on our soil, we have a condition concerning security. Security from today onwards means from now on, American forces are banned from launching operations on Afghan houses.
Karzai earlier said he would not sign until after a presidential election due next April. The statement shocked the U.S. and drew criticism from one of his opponents, Abdullah, a presidential candidate.
President Karzai's main point is something personal that he asks. And then the other day in the inauguration, he talked about it. He talked about the elections. Linking bilateral security agreement with the elections in itself is dangerous. It's not just risky, it's dangerous. And we don't need that.
U.S. troops are scheduled to leave Afghanistan at the end of 2014.
In Pakistan, some 4,000 protesters of Jamaat Islami JI and Imran Khan's Pakistan Tehreek Insaf PTI marched through Karachi demanding the closure of NATO supply routes. The activists blocked the main supply route for NATO troops in Afghanistan to protest the ongoing U.S. drone attacks. The PTI controls one of the two main Pakistani border points, 70% of which is used to transport foreign troops. Blocking NATO vehicles at border checkpoints could disrupt the operation of U.S.-led forces in Afghanistan, but any decision to close supply routes through Pakistan would have to come from the central government in Islamabad. Around the South London flat where 3 women were enslaved for 30 years, British police are maintaining a round-the-clock presence while detectives sift through bags of evidence collected from the home. According to reports, the case is one of the strangest and longest-running to ever emerge in Britain. The captives were controlled by a couple now in their 60s through brainwashing and beatings in what police are calling a disturbing picture of emotional control. The accused were arrested and released on bail pending further inquiries. Pope Francis held an outdoor mass in St. Peter's Square, officially concluding the year of faith initiated by his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, before his resignation in February. Displayed at the Mass for the first time in public were what the Vatican believes are the bones of the Apostle Peter. The relics, which were found in the mausoleums beneath St. Peter's Basilica in 1942 and subsequently tested and identified by the Vatican, were placed in a bronze chest with Latin inscription and displayed by the altar. The Mass was attended by patriarchs and major archbishops of the Eastern Catholic churches, with whom the Pope said he hoped to collaborate to advance peace efforts in the Middle East.
With this gesture, through them, I would like to reach all those Christians living in the Holy Land and in Syria and the entire East, and obtain for them the gift of peace and concord.
About a quarter of Rio de Janeiro's perimetral overpass came tumbling down as the Brazilian city looks to revitalize the most neglected downtown port area ahead of the 2016 Olympics. A tunnel planned to be completed by 2015 will replace the 4.8-kilometer overpass, which has long been an eyesore. A series of explosions leveled about a quarter stretch of the overpass in just 5 seconds. More than 500 specialists participated in the demolition project, which used close to 1,200 kilograms of explosives to take out the pillars and span off the highway. A new Argentine soccer superstar could be in the making. Though he's only 8 years old, but already Argentine soccer phenomenon Claudio Nunsfeld is catching the eye of professional European clubs. Manchester United, Chelsea, Real Madrid and Barcelona are all reportedly keeping close watch of this prodigy. His coach says that as soon as Claudio started to play, he was different from all the rest of his playmates with regards to techniques. He had distinct qualities when it came to taking the ball with his foot, breaking, stopping, kicking, and even shooting on the goal. Claudio has earned the nickname Snow Messi in reference to Argentina's soccer star Lionel Messi. And finally, it continues to be relatively cold tonight with partly cloudy skies and northwesterly moderate winds. A slight rise in temperature is expected tomorrow, creating fair conditions in most regions with southeasterly moderate winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect warm conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. A breakthrough deal is reached between Iran and 6 world powers to curb but not scrap Tehran's uranium enrichment, and Iranians welcome the agreement with optimism. Fighting continues in Syria, leaving more than 160 people dead around Damascus suburbs, and diplomatic sources say the Syria peace conference may be set for January. And mixed reactions on the streets of Cairo after interim President Adli Mansour signs a bill requiring protesters to get permission from the police before gathering. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.